Hey everybody, what's up? It's your boy MJ, and welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience before the pour, where I get to make all types of mistakes. AKA 20 Questions MJ. My guest today is was named one of the most 50 influential women in wine. She's a Georgetown graduate, a Fulbright scholar in Russia and Georgia, not the great state of the country, and also a recipient, oh my God, of both law and master degrees from Yale University. She's an author and founder of Tasting Works, Lisa Granik. Lisa was born and raised in Philadelphia. We'll get to talk about that. She studied foreign service at Georgetown before graduating from Yale Law School, which means she could have been on the Supreme Court, as that's like 6 of the 9 justices who go to Yale Law School. Pretty much have to go to Yale Law School to be on the Supreme Court. Then she taught at her alma mater, Georgetown, as well as Moscow State University and the Institute of State and Law in, I used to know how to say that. How do you say that? Tbilisi, Georgia, as a Fulbright scholar, where she eventually earned her doctorate. With a long-time passion for wine, she developed a curiosity and a knack for the nuance of winemaking, wine production, retail, import, and distribution. In 2006, she became one of the several hundred masters of wine in the world, and at that time there were only 299. We'll check in with her to see how many there are now. In 2010, she established Tasting Works, which offered tailored go-to-market strategies for wine regions and family-run wineries seeking to develop brands to enter and or improve their penetration in the American market. She also spent time as a professor of wine, beer, and spirits. Didn't know there was such a thing at the New York Institute of Technology from 2013 through 2015. Her multiple speaking engagements include the Smithsonian Institute. She's like the fucking smartest guest we've ever had. The Cité de Vin et Civilisation in Bordeaux and numerous conferences. Lisa frequently judges in wine competitions worldwide, and her writings on wine have appeared in the publications such as the Sommelier Journal, The World of Fine Wine, and the New York Times. Her book, The Wines of Georgia, was published in 2020 and is regarded as the definitive book on the subject, and her annual Granik's Guide to Georgian Wine was released in 2021. Welcome, Lisa. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thanks a lot, MJ. I'm really honored to be here and happy to share a couple glasses of wine and chat with you.
I am really excited that we finally got to make this happen. Thank you. Big shout out to Madeline Maldonado.
Maddie, absolutely.
So to warm us up, what I do, I start by asking you some personal questions. They're not really personal. And then I follow those 10 up with James Lipton's 10 famous questions from inside the actor's studio. All right? So the key is just answer them. First thing that comes to your mind. Mm-hmm. You ready?
Get ready.
All right. What is your favorite book?
I'm going to say The Poisonwood Bible.
Okay.
By Barbara Kingsolver.
Okay. Oh, I know Barbara. Yeah, okay. I don't know that book, but I know. Yeah. Wow.
It's an exploration of America and a lot of what America has done. An American hubris. I'll leave it at that. It's a marvelous read.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. I love a good book. What's your favorite movie?
Chinatown.
Oh, that's a good one. Young Jack. Faye Dunaway, right?
Faye Dunaway. My sister, my daughter, my sister. John Huston.
Yeah, exactly. Who's your favorite musical artist?
Today it's Igor Levit.
Igor Levit. Now, what type of genre is Igor?
He's a classical pianist.
Okay.
I saw him at Carnegie Hall last week. He's extraordinary.
Very nice. Favorite food? What are you having? Last meal?
Fish.
Any particular fish?
I eat almost all fish.
Okay.
But not fried.
As as I'm the king of cheeseburgers and chicken wings, if you look at my Instagram, tomorrow smash burger night at my house with twice fried fries. Shouldn't do it.
Fries are I don't eat fried food except for fries.
Okay, you got to eat French fries.
Lisa's Happy Meal, champagne and fries. Come on.
Oh, my God. Yes, absolutely. Who's your favorite athlete?
I go back to Willis Reed.
Ooh, that's a good one. When athletes were definitely gentlemen and scholars.
I was from Philly, but I loved the Knicks in that time, and it was
very cool. Favorite cartoon as a child?
Peanuts.
Favorite cold cereal?
Grape nuts.
That is just not anything I've
I could
ever
say
said.
Cheerios. I could say Cheerios,
I mean,
you know?
because grape nuts, those shits were so hard. They break your mouth.
Oh, you gotta love grape nuts. It's an acquired taste, and you know, I used to like cornflakes. Except that on one of my trips abroad, I had cornflakes. I think I was in Finland. They were real cornflakes. They were the most amazing cornflakes I'd ever had in my life, and I could never have cornflakes again. And I do have a sweet spot for Cheerios.
I could see
soft spot
having like something monumental like this. These are just like Kellogg's cornflakes. These aren't cornflakes.
Yeah, they were. It was a revelation.
What do you do for exercise?
Oh, well, that's been an evolution because I used to swim.
Okay.
And now it's a combination of weight work and yoga. But for many years, I was working on a one-arm chin-up.
Oh, very nice. So I could do that a couple of years ago. I don't know if I could do it now.
Yeah, well, I overtrained and issues. And
well, that's why I can't do it. I can't do push-ups anymore. I've overused my elbows.
I still do. Yeah, it's my shoulders. I have issues.
It's my elbow.
But I do a lot of push-ups.
You know, yeah. I love push-ups, and I haven't done them in about 2 years. Just like I do, like you can do it for a couple of days, and then like I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do 50 in a row because I used to do like 6. And then,
sure, yeah.
And I'm like, I can't my elbow hurt.
My shoulder, it's killing me all the time. Yeah.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Oh, now I have to think about who I'm not allowed to say.
Oh no! No.
There were all of these people, you know, that I used to think were hilarious.
Everybody on the show. Listen. Like so many people have said Chappelle, they're trying to cancel now. But like,
I thought Woody Allen was brilliant in many ways. Yeah. So, but there, you got some issues. There are a lot of issues. So.
Well, I think.
All right, but right now, I think Kate McKinnon's.
She's funny.
Amazing.
I don't know. I've never seen her do stand-up, but she is hilarious in sketches and even the damn Verizon commercial. She's funny.
She's funny.
Okay. Who would you most like to have a bottle of wine with?
Oh, that's actually really hard because that also has changed over time. And it probably, well, for a long time, it was Al Stewart, who's still alive. Year of the Cat.
Year of the Cat.
Yeah, but he's a historian and he's a wine guy too, because when he was started out, he got paid in wines from the '70s in Petrus and Margaux and all this because nobody knew what it was. So he had this wonderful cellar. And so I actually would, because frankly, I wouldn't mind rating his cellar. So I'll say Al Stewart for the moment.
There's a story, I don't know if it's him, but that was common in the '70s, like where I'll have to look it up again, but like it was some British guys and like they like drank all this like Oberon and Margaux, but like and then like trashed the place, like it was like a part, like they weren't like enjoying it. It was just wine that they got paid with.
But for a long time, I really wish I could. Another guy who was a wine guy, speaking of Margaux, was Richard Nixon, whom I hated with a passion, right? You know what he used to do, right? At state dinners, they all had Bordeaux. And before dinner, he would have his Chateau Margaux that would be poured into an empty bottle. And everybody else would have just some, whatever, French wine, Bordeaux, and he had his own bottle of Margaux. And there are times where I still wish I might have liked to have talked to.
You know what's
Nixon.
crazy? I thought you were going to say Nixon because I was thinking, because I asked this question. I've asked it 50 some odd times, and I was like, but I would like to have a bottle of Richard Nixon because he drank good wine and just want to get inside that tricky mind of his.
Yeah. Well, I've gone through long.
He's a Yale man.
No, he was not. He went to Duke.
Oh, no, he went to Duke.
He went to Duke for law school. Yeah. He went to Whittier for college.
He didn't get into Yale.
But he was very resentful.
Yeah, he was right. That's what it was. He was resentful about
his whole life. Yeah. But, I grew up and as a child, I detested him. And then I grew to have some degree of respect for certain things that he did. Yeah. And then I've gone back to mostly hating almost everything that he did.
Okay, Lisa, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. And I'm going to ask you the questions made famous by James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. Lisa, what is your favorite word?
Steuerer.
And what is Schwebe?
It's a grape variety from Germany, and I just like saying it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, see, I call it Shruby. Shruby. Now
I've been some people joke that I only like to order it because I like to say it, but I actually do like the wine.
Yeah. I mean, it is a really cool.
Yeah, it's a good word to get your,
yeah,
mouth around.
What is your least favorite word?
Because I should say my favorite word was no. My least favorite, maybe.
I get it. Because maybe pretty much always means no.
It's like make a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Say yes or no. Come on.
That's a Jack Johnson song. Remember that one, Glow? Yeah. What turns you on?
Great music.
Conversely, what turns you off?
Really bad music.
Wow. I'm going to guess with this. What sound or noise do you love? Really good music.
Yeah, I have a penchant for tonality.
Okay. What sound or noise do you hate?
Extraordinarily discordant sounds. Harsh sounds. As
Chalkboard.
Chalkboard.
Yeah. What is your favorite curse word, Philly girl?
It's the perfect word. Fuck.
It is.
It just you can go everywhere with it.
It just.
Yes.
It's not a situation you can't fit it in.
That's it. There was a poster, the perfect word. I have a copy of it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I wish I could be a really good pianist, but I never will be. I will never be a great piano player.
Okay. What profession would you not like to do?
Be in government.
Harder now than ever, I would say. And then lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You get to choose your playlist.
Oh, nice. That was a lot of fun. And if you want more Elisa, and I know you do, make sure you tune into our episode of the Black Wine Guy Experience. Peace. Hey, everybody. What's up? It's your boy MJ, and welcome to the Black Wine Guy Experience. My guest today was named one of the 50 most influential women in the wine trade, a Georgetown graduate, a Yale graduate, Fulbright scholar in Russia and Georgia, recipient of both law and master's degrees from Yale, an author and founder of Tasting Works, Lisa Granik. She was born and raised in Philadelphia, studied foreign service at Georgetown before graduating from Yale Law School, and then she taught at her alma mater, Georgetown, as well as Moscow State University and the Institute of State and Law
in
Tbilisi, Georgia, as a Fulbright scholar, which eventually earned her a doctorate. With a longtime passion for wine, she developed a curiosity and a knack for the nuance of winemaking, wine production, retail, import, and distribution. In 2006, she became one of the several hundred masters of wine in the world, and at that time there were only 299. In 2010, she established Tasting Works, which offers tailored go-to-market strategies for wine regions and family-run wineries seeking to develop brands to enter and or improve their penetration in the American market. She also spent time as a professor of wine, beer, and spirits at the New York Institute of Technology from 2013 to 2015. Her multiple speaking engagements include the Smithsonian Institute, the Cité de Vin et Civilisation in Bordeaux, and numerous conferences. She frequently judges in wine competitions worldwide. Her writings on wine have appeared in publications such as the Sommelier Journal, The World of Fine Wine, and the New York Times. And her book, The Wines of Georgia, was published in 2020 and is regarded as the definitive book on the subject. Her annual Granik's Guide to Georgian Wine was released in 2021. Woo! Welcome, Lisa. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm open for your questions. It's not sure what there is to add.
Well, let's start. Tell us what we're drinking tonight.
Okay, so I've developed. You never know how your path in life can kind of circle around. And when I first went to the Soviet Union, which it was at the time, I was a student and I drank wine. I was actually writing notes when I was in college, but I never ever thought I would go into the wine business. And then ultimately, fast forward more than 20 years later, I end up finding that my background in Russian area studies in the Soviet Union merged very well with these up-and-coming wine regions in the Caucasus. And I found that I was able to put, I had left the Soviet Union and Russia long behind, and all of a sudden here I was able to use my language skills and my understanding of the history and merge it with wine. And so I brought 3 wines. 2 are Georgian, 1 is Armenian, to show you, these are some of the, both countries have indigenous grape varieties, Vitis vinifera, that they make in different styles. And so the first 2 wines are from a winery called Capistoni in a region called Kartli. And basically 70% of the wine in Georgia is made in the east.
Okay.
And Kartli is, to my view, like the new up-and-coming region. It's very close to the capital, and it's a little cooler than Tbilisi, than Kakheti in the east, where it's really hot. So they have different grape varieties and cooler temperatures. And they provide they're very crisp, appealing wines that are easy to drink, and with just because a grape variety is indigenous or unique doesn't necessarily mean it's interesting or delicious. And so
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, like you see people say, "Oh my God, this is the coolest wine."
No, I know.
It's this obscure thing, right?
Right.
And
I made it naturally. And,
oh yeah, right. And okay, but it smells like smells like a wet mop.
Exactly.
And it tastes like dishwater.
Yeah.
And it's okay, it's interesting, and it's made badly. And no, this is not terroir. This is dirt. Okay, so but no, these wines are actually the Capistoni wines. They're all made in Kvevri, in the clay vessel, the terracotta vessel, and. It's a relatively small family winery. I brought 2 different wines of grape varieties that I really like. One is Chinabuli, which is also called Chinuri. That's the white wine.
Okay.
Technically it is an orange wine.
I was gonna say it's really golden in color.
Right, because it spends time on the skins, and you'll feel that tannin. But the Georgians have been working. And Nico in particular, I've talked with him a lot about how he's making his wines, and he actually spent some time living in the States, so he understands the world of wine and what the competition is. And he's not one of these guys who said, "Yeah, I just watched my grandfather," and he understands what the world is looking for, and that you can have old traditions and still make fine, engaging, delicious wines. And so the tannin in this wine is not going to be really aggressive and chalking as you can get in a lot of orange wines.
Yeah. It's really interesting. For me, it's like a full circle thing. When I first started in the business in '97 at Acker, actually was dating a woman from Georgia.
Were you really?
Yeah. And she was like, "They make wine in my country," but I think she was drinking the stuff from like where it was warm, like the sweeter stuff.
Well, that was the stuff they sent.
And that's what they sent over at that time, right?
That's what, because that was in the 20th century, Georgia was made the country to make. Georgia and Moldova were the factories to make wine for Russia.
Okay.
And Russians have a sweet tooth. Cristal was originally a sweet champagne made for the Russians, right? So that style of wine was made for them. And then when the Soviet emigration, the people came here, they demanded those wines, and those wines were sent. Armenia, in contrast, they were forced to make brandy.
This is going to be such a dope episode, y'all. Probably. We have super smart people who've been on this podcast. I think there's so many smart people in the world of wine. It's just because if it feeds that intellectual desire. Like you can never know it all. You're a master winer. You know you don't know it all.
No, I saw something. There was a hilarious. It was on Facebook or the internet the other day. It was on Twitter. Somebody showed it to me, and it showed this graph of how somebody who's they take their first certificate in wine and they think they know everything, right? And then they keep studying, and their confidence level just goes further and further down, right? And then it basically gets to the point where ultimately it goes back up, and you become an MW. And the MW begins to feel like, ends up saying, okay, this stuff is pretty complicated. And I said, I have a problem with this graph because, yeah, you do all this studying and I still feel this way. All of a sudden I'm going along and I think, yeah, I do know some stuff. But then you go somewhere, you talk with somebody who knows obviously so much more about you, and you think, I don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And there's this down, and even now, it's a field that's always changing. Mm-hmm. New discoveries, new wineries, new wines, climate change. Whether it's the science and the art. So that's one of the reasons I love it so much. You can never know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what drew me to it.
The people who pretend they do are just really irritating.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so funny. It's true. I'm like, bro, you don't know.
You don't know, right?
But and it's one of those things where people go, "Oh, you're wine." I'm like, I'm not a wine expert, man. I might know. I don't consider myself a wine expert. I know enough. Mary Ewing Mulligan said that, but she's like, I know you know enough about wine to sit here and have a conversation with me. So that's a compliment coming from an MW.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there is something that would. I don't like the word expert, and I don't consider myself a wine expert. I'm knowledgeable, and I know that I know a lot. There are lots of things that I know. I probably have forgotten more than I know.
Yeah.
And winemakers have their own area of expertise,
yep.
and and so forth and so on.
Right.
And yeah, I feel like I am conversant to a point.
Right. I love it. So we like to start at the beginning. What was it like growing up in Philly?
Well, I still love Philadelphia, but I grew up. My mom went to Overbrook High School, so that's why when you go when you were talking about sports,
classic high school.
Well, and Wilt Chamberlain was a classmate. This is West Philly, Overbrook. That was my neck of the woods, and I'm still friendly. My father was a pharmacist and had a place on an area that was called Spaghetti Bend. So we would go to the Italian. My father was an honorary member of the Italian American Democratic Club. No women allowed, and wine was Pinot Grigio, whatever the wine was served in little tumblers with ice cubes, and that was my introduction to wine actually. But my parents, I won't call it white flight, call it what it is. Went to the burbs for me to go to school, and I was miserable. I hated suburbia and
no flavor.
Nah, my parents were actually city people, right. And so our lives revolved around always going back into the city.
Right.
And the vibrancy, the music scene in Philadelphia. There's the art, whether in the arts, it's a conservative city in many ways, but it's a very musical city.
Yeah.
And certainly for me growing up, rock and roll.
Right.
It was a great place to be.
Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia. We have something in common. I also am a law school graduate. It's not as prestigious as Yale. Well, Rutgers is a good school, but it's not.
Rutgers is a good school.
So I was at Rutgers Camden, so I was across the river, and then I lived in Philly for a year afterwards. And I agree, Philly, and this was the '90s. Now, I never really spent time with it. Like it was, like I said, it was very blue collar town. Like it was.
Very
I was
much.
amazed. I was like, this town's kind of really. It's like, it's like first generation. Like in the '90s, first generation. I was in school with first generation white kids who were the first person in their family to go to college. Like that's the South Jersey kind of Philly thing, not this little kind of bubble.
That's how I grew up.
So I know what you mean. Like and when I went back, I left like in '97. I went back in '04, and the city had changed. I can only think what the city must look like to you, having grew up there. Like, because it still was like Philly was like if you guys Philly's become. Like the food scene's way better, like fine dining's way better, and they had all these factories that are now lofts. They're all super expensive, but those were just burnt out graffiti buildings right across from Camden, right on the water.
It's still a tragically sad city, to be perfectly honest.
I would agree.
It's really segregated.
Yep.
And this conversation can go in a really it's everything that's just gone on with the fire at the row house. It's a very segregated city, and curiously, there's a lot of Trump America in the city. We think about the urban areas as being.
No, that's what I'm saying. When I was in law school, these guys were like
some of these people.
He wasn't around, but like the political views we just felt like.
Absolutely.
I was like, you live in a city?
Yeah, no. My sister, I have a sister who still lives there. She's on the main line, but she was driving like in places where we were living, and she said to me, she knew what was going to happen in not the Biden election, the earlier election. He should not be named, and she said I could see the red signs, all the area we grew up, and so I go back there, and I look back. I have traveled very far from where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there are people with whom I grew up they're not pretentious people.
Right.
They're real honest people.
Mm-hmm.
And my father died very recently, and that's all right. And I got tears shed long ago, but I caught up with people that I worked with because I worked with my dad,
mm-hmm.
and they liked me for who I was. There was no pretense. It wasn't where you went to school. It wasn't
mm-hmm.
what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt very comfortable in that environment. And there was no posturing. And I look back on Philadelphia, fondly with that. And then I go to the Jersey Shore in the summer, and there's still a lot of that there.
Yeah. But I mean, if we're talking about Philadelphia, let's get down to the really most important question: where do you get your steaks? and that's for you guys. That's a cheese steak for everyone listening around the country. It's called a steak.
Well, that's
going like I want a cheese steak with.
But it's funny because Pat's was always. I grew up going to Thunderbird, which is still there. It's in Broomall on Westchester Pike, and Pat's is famous.
Right.
And you know what? It's not that I even eat cheesesteaks much anymore, but hoagies. Hoagies is White House in Atlantic City. White House is it.
Oh, I've seen them. They've been on like all those shows, Food Network shows.
White House is it.
Yeah.
And we've done taste tests. I'm telling you. And the thing is, the hoagie's the best in Jersey because it's all about the water and the bread.
Well, exactly. There is a good spot in Philly. I don't know if you've been. It's called Pizzeria Badia.
No.
I'm gonna get him on there. This guy Joe. He wrote a book called Pizza Camp, but he makes actually really good pizza. And we'll get to the pizza because you know about pizza because we both lived in New Haven. So,
right.
But he makes a really good pizza as someone who lived in New Haven, and he also makes hoagies. Like they got a whole hoagie room at this place, and they got good wines. Like they're
where do you get water ice?
I don't know, man. I wonder if he's getting the water.
Water ice. Yeah. Maroney's. It's the only place. Maroney's.
I was Jim's for my South Street.
Oh my God! Yeah, I forgot about Jim's.
And this is the kicker. Like these are certain things where you have to have like the most processed thing. Cheese whiz. I get a steak, onions with whiz.
It's the only way.
The only way.
It's the only way. See, that's why if you come to Philadelphia, you just can't be pretentious.
No.
You just can't.
No. But like I said, they got some cool places. Like I go down there because I went to law school down there, and I'm friends with some of my professors because I was like research assistant. And, there's a good Montreal bagel place. It's the only place around.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know if there's any in Manhattan, but this guy down there is making some killer Montreal bagels.
There are a couple of new ones that I've read about lately, but haven't been.
Yeah, they're good. So next time you're down, check out the. Yeah. So you mentioned that your dad, he was an honorary member of the Italian American Men's Club.
Democratic Club.
I'm sorry, Italian American Men's Democratic Club.
Well, it didn't have men in the title. It was just the Italian American Democratic Club.
Oh, so there you go. See, and how timely is that when voting rights was shot down as we record this? Like it didn't have to put it doesn't say men, but there was no women allowed.
Right. No. Well, women could go in, but you had to go with the male member. That was how we got in. Right.
Was there a wine culture in your house, though, outside of like Pinot Grigio and little tumblers?
Not really.
No?
Not really. We had no. I did not grow up with wine. I discovered wine or decided to explore wine when I was in college, and I was lucky that when I was in school, I went to Georgetown, and D.C. The drinking age at the time was 18, so I was able to explore at a relatively early age.
Yeah. So, what was that like? What was Georgetown like? And let's talk about some of your explorations, because, D.C. it's an international city because of all the embassies, diplomats. So it's always kind of this food scene and great wine shops down there, like iconic Calvert
D.C. Look, D.C. is also a tremendously segregated city.
Yes.
Okay. But and it certainly was. I mean, Georgetown, everything's set up. Come on, it was set up. We remained segregated.
Adams Morgan.
Totally. Adams Morgan was the one really cool place when I was living there. But the wine shops were great, and that was one of the ways I got into wine was that the laws were quite liberal, and there were wine shops that you could go, and they would have these big tastings on a Saturday afternoon. So especially then when I was a lawyer, I'd go to work Saturday morning and work through the day until about 1 o'clock, and I would quit. And there was a wine shop across the street, and they had 7 or 8 wines lined up. And the rule was you could taste as many things as you wanted, but you had to go in order, and you couldn't skip. You could go backwards. And I would stand there and listen to what people were saying, and I had no clue. It was not until I was then going on that first Fulbright, and I decided, it was after the '82 vintage, and I was decided to buy some wine in quantity, and I drove around D.C., or I took the metro around D.C. to buy, looking for the best deals because it was pre-internet, and I found that all these people that I used to taste with at 1 or 2 shops, they would take the metro like. It was like the wine train. And they would be going
DC wine train.
They were going from shop to shop all Saturday afternoon. I was like, geez, I missed the boat on that one, or at least I missed the train. But so it was a great place to go, and it was lots of wines were affordable. I mean, I was able to taste. I tasted DRC in a wine shop, or
and that shit will never happen. Nobody's popping open in DRC for you to taste it. But like that's what people don't get. Like. I think that's like, I had John Cape on, and he was telling me about his dad, like Michael, like he couldn't sell DRC, like he was giving it away to corporate clients, like a case of Petrus was like $200. I'm not paying $200 for a case of wine in the 70s.
Even for less money, people, I forget how many distributors couldn't sell Grange, Penfolds Grange.
Oh, that's still, but by and by, people, that's so underrated a wine in my opinion still. I mean, it's right up there with any first growth, with any. It's
a great wine.
It's a great wine. 76 Grange, one of the best wines I ever had.
Yeah, I bet it too.
Yeah,
right.
Really good. Yeah.
So it was. I was lucky. It was a place where you could explore a lot of different things, and the '85 port vintage, or it was all these different things, and the opportunity was right there, and I would just go around and listen to what people said, and then Parker was often distributed locally for free, and I would read Parker, and I would read what he wrote about a certain wine. I would think, wow, man, I don't agree with this at all. And I would write it, but that was that at the time. So but then I thought, okay, well, that's how he tastes. I had my own opinion, and that's fine.
And I love that. That's another thing too. Like I don't like people who like necessarily poo-poo or shit on Parker. Like that's just his opinion. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to subscribe, and most people don't like him, don't even subscribe, so you didn't pay for the newsletter. So what do you care, bro?
But he made wine popular, and
exactly
that was it. He gave people something to talk about,
right? And
so he's a lightning rod, or was a lightning rod, but he raised awareness, and he got people thinking and talking and fighting, and there was influence that was bad, but there was a lot that was really good, and he did raise the profile. And look, wine is made to be sold, and he increased the audience for wine.
It's called the wine business,
Indeed.
Kids.
Right.
So what did you majored in, like government down at Georgetown, like
international relations?
So what? Right. Why did you, like, girl from Philadelphia, at least from Philadelphia? Why'd you want to major in international relations?
Well, I've long thought that Americans suffer from what I call the Huck Finn syndrome. So we get back into banned books, but if you'll recall in Tom Sawyer, there's a discussion between Huck and Jim.
Yeah.
And they're trying to talk about, why, Jim's not a man, right? Or why it's why a Frenchman's not a man. And, and basically like a cow, if you talk to a cow, what does cow say? And you can't talk to a cow because cow goes moo, right? And then Huck says to Jim, yeah, well, if I said parlez-vous français, what does that mean? And Jim says, basically, no, because if he were a man, it's not how a man talks. And it just, it's all about the ignorance of America,
absolutely,
and other cultures. And I loved. I grew up in school, not at home, learning other languages, and there's all this talk about stepping in the shoes of another guy, but you never really understand how someone else thinks until you try to learn their language. And that's been one of the most mind-expanding experiences I've ever had. to think about how people orient their thinking. And so I originally did think I would go into government in some way. And Georgetown was a way that I didn't have to take a hard science. I could take economics instead.
It's a hard science to a lot of people, though.
and take several languages, because I already spoke French and Spanish at that time. And wanted to
How many languages do you speak now?
French, Spanish, Russian's actually my best language, unfortunately. And I can get by if I need to in Italian, and there, smatterings of. I can get by in Georgian, but admittedly in Georgia most of the time I just speak Russian. It's easier.
Yeah, I mean, you've been here with me for like almost 40 minutes. You know I can barely speak English, so I don't know what to say.
But it is. I think a lot of America's problem is in the world is that we're too inward.
Oh,
and,
yes.
Right, and we should be. Now Lisa's getting on her soapbox, but America is in many ways one of the world's greatest experiments, and this is the world here together. And what we're either solving a lot of the world's problems, which are our own problems together, or we're all going to hell. And we need to.
I don't want to say cheers, but it's cheers because it's true.
There we go.
I agree with you. When I lived in New York, it irks me when people don't try to understand someone, like someone, a foreigner. Like if you just watch their mouth, look at their eyes, look at their face, you can figure out, you can communicate with people, and you don't and people don't. So many people don't try to do that. They don't try to understand another person.
And what's so stupid about it, really, is that you end up, arguably, it's very selfish, because you end up learning so much more about yourself when you learn about somebody else. And really, all the times I've ever been abroad, certainly, especially the times I went to the Soviet Union, you come home and for all of the faults that this country has, you realize how blessed, how lucky we are that we live here. I mean, look, it wasn't my family emigrated here, and I didn't have to be born here. And so I'm very aware of that.
I remember the first time I came from abroad, and you come through immigration, and immigration, they check you, and they go, welcome home. They said, welcome home, Mr. Tal. I was like, oh my God, I am home. I'm an American. And it felt good. Like, it actually felt good. I was like, oh my God, like I never thought of America as my home until you leave it. Right. And then you come back. I had a great experience. It was that time I was in Dublin, but I was like, wow, I actually felt like I belonged here, like welcome home, and it's true. It's an experiment.
That's how I feel when I come back to New York
now. So you finish up at Georgetown. You get a perfect score on your LSATs. I made that up, but she probably did. She probably did. She probably did. She's just being modest. I do know someone who got like a perfect score on their what was it? Their GRE. My law professor's kid. I was like, it's a perfect score. But when she was like 12, she came to our law school class, and she was so smart. And then you go to the house that the Supreme Court built. You went to Yale Law School. You landed in New Haven, Connecticut. So you D.C. to New Haven. That's on that. Now it's the Acela, but that's the classic Amtrak. It's a Boston Back Bay to D.C. That's a power corridor, particularly for lawyers. I mean, deals. That's a power corridor.
No, it's the best law school in the country. There's no two ways about it. Right.
So what? Who was at Yale? Because Yale has like all crazy professors. Like who was there? Any crazy professors there? Like what kind of scholars and then what? Did you have first year is just kind of your basic classes, but did you have a concentration there when you were at Yale?
Yeah, well, I was actually working on the doctorate. So I studied with Leon Lipson, who's gone, who was a scholar of Soviet law, as it were. And, I mean, who was there? Akil Lamar is still there. Bruce Ackerman's still there. But it was, for most people, you go to Yale Law School and you're there at the beginning and you're just in awe that you can't believe you're there. Right?
I mean, it's like
you're in awe. It's like I can't believe I'm
it's like
here.
The Olympics of law school. It's like whatever the highest level, like whatever sport, like Yale Law School is it.
And so there are a good number of people in different positions. Either they're now deans of different law faculties, or they're judges on different courts.
Federal levels.
Federal and state level that I went to school with.
The Supreme Court.
None of my classmates.
But they all do, and that's where all the Yale kids get the clerk for the Supreme Court judges, regardless, and the federal court judges.
The one thing that's really sad that has changed, and I haven't been back to Yale recently, but one of the things that really has changed about the law profession, and most of the people that I know who are lawyers that became lawyers in the, let's just say, before the 90s, and it's a result of salaries going up, was that Yale Law School was absolutely a place where people went because they wanted to do good in the world. And Georgetown, the same thing. I mean, Georgetown is a Jesuit institution,
right.
And the notion of public service is very strongly ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to Georgetown to talk about the work that I was doing with family wineries. And several students said to me, like, well, how do you square what you're doing with social justice? What are you doing that in your that is making the world a better place? And I said, well, look, I'm working with families that have had generations of traditions, and this is their land, this is their ethos, and whether it's inheritance laws, mm-hmm. or the way in which the world is getting smaller, there are different things, large corporations, that is imperiling their patrimony. And I tried to make a nice story for what is a family business, but it wasn't. I wasn't feeding starving children, and somehow that wasn't good enough.
Very true. But I had a friend. He went to. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. He died young. But he went to Fairfield, which is a Jesuit school, mm-hmm. and I mean, this guy, serious public service. I mean, like, he was a teacher in New Haven public school system. He took in a young lady, like, let her live with him, and she ended up going to Georgetown,
okay,
for undergrad and graduate, and got a degree in government. But like he lived it. He walked the walk.
And look, for me, it's not a stretch. One of the reasons, if you go to Georgia or Armenia, these are really poor countries.
Well, I was going to say, it's not a stretch. People don't know.
Right. These are really poor countries. And without, it's not like Italy has, right? They have pasta, they have rice, they have locomotives, they have cars,
oil, yeah.
They have all these industries. Yeah. These two countries they have nothing. And they're trying to do something to give people jobs. It is their history, and they're so tiny in terms of world production. And what I can do is, in some ways, give these cultures, and these are ancient cultures that have survived for millennia, and they're threatened by a very big neighbor,
and genocide in Armenia.
And genocide in Armenia, more than once, yeah. Right. So this is a way of helping these smaller places have a place at the table.
Right. No, I hear you. Let's talk about the time you did spend in Russia and Georgia. Like, what? I don't even know where to start. So yeah.
Well, somebody asked me today, and I didn't answer the question. Like, what was it like being there? And it depends on, in terms of Russia, particularly the Soviet Union, I loved being there because, again, Russian's a very difficult language. I loved having to be immersed in this environment. It was pre-internet, right? I couldn't call home. Of course, I didn't want to call home, but I didn't. There was no phone service, etc. So it was fantastic, but I always knew I could leave at any moment. Mm-hmm. So again, coming from a position of privilege. And then Russia is also amazing because there were so many things that were so absurd. And I loved that absurdity that, you can read Bulgakov. He wrote this wonderful, whether it's The Master and Margarita or Heart of a Dog, watch the movie, it's great. These things that happen that there's no rationality to it. And you can drive yourself crazy. You'll get an aneurysm trying to figure out what the reason, because there is no reason. Okay, and so that was phenomenal to experience. On the other hand, sometimes it's infuriating to come back home and see that we share some similar characteristics in terms of our bureaucracy and sometimes inwardness and so forth. Because the Soviet Union was an international country. It was created in its way. Ours was different, but also created in its way, forcibly. Okay, and we each dealt with those things in different ways. And so the contrast of the countries and the similarities, it's there's a lot of food for thought with that. But the food was terrible. I lived on potatoes.
I mean, so that shit about potatoes is true, right?
Oh, absolutely, it was terrible. It's different now, but let me tell you something. It was.
Well, they got potatoes. All those billionaires. They got all kinds of.
Well, they weren't there.
I know.
They weren't there when I was there. Yeah. Now it's a wholly different situation.
And you mentioned like it was crazy there. There is still there's lots of craziness in actually Russia. Let's talk about just briefly, that only they can't call it champagne. Only Russian wine.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, there's this huge. This is like again another thing that the Russians say that is typically hilarious because during the Soviet Union, they made Sovietskaya Shampanskaya, and it was bicycle pump method. It was wine that was made in Georgia or Ukraine or wherever it was, and they invented it was carbonated like Coke. Mm-hmm. And they would take you to their factories. They called them factories, and they would say, even the French say that Soviet champagne is better than French champagne. Yeah, this was a political spat. It was ridiculous. But it's true. They still call it. They do have a word for it, which is igristaya, which means sparkling wine. But they still call it shampanskaya.
Yeah, and actually, there was a law passed that like everybody who's importing like champagne can't call itself champagne anymore.
That's right.
They have to everywhere else in the world, right, except for Russia and America, because we kind of flex in like American champagne, but like the rest of the world has respect for terroir and regions. Right. But like Dom, like they caved. Moet Hennessy caved.
It was unbelievable.
They took champagne off their label.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is crazy. The Germans would have bought. There's so many countries they could have sold that to.
But the French, I could say a lot of racist things about the French in a couple of world wars. So I'm not going to go there.
Ooh.
I'm bad. You might want to edit that one out.
No, listen. Just edit yourself. That's why we.
I'm bad. I should have.
Who signed the waiver? Someone was like, "Oh shit."
I made a mistake.
Was it Greco? Yeah, he's like, I don't know if I should sign this.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually do a joke about like with the waiver, like if you say Jancis Robbins it's going to be on the podcast. Just say it. Like, hey. Yeah, I mean the world is a complex and interesting place, and this is a safe place, and but we could talk after we're done. But this is a safe place, UK, and it's hard to offend me.
Oh, I didn't think I was going to offend
you. No, I know.
You.
I mean, and I think my listeners. It's funny. I'm trying to figure out my different, but my listeners kind of like that. I do keep it real. Like I just, and as I gotten older, like literally, I was like, I do understand. Someone who ran for president one time did have some great slogans, right? And so for me, I'm like, it's just too much bullshit. Enough of the bullshit. Right. I do agree with that. Like, enough of the bullshit, right? Like we're talking about indigenous grapes with your dirty feet. Like, enough of the bullshit, bro.
Yeah, but wait. Yeah, actually, I'm going to leave that champagne question aside. We can talk about it afterwards.
I mean, now you want me to go? I want to go deeper because I'm like, what do you think about grower champagne and this and that? So
I love grower champagne. Not every grower.
Yeah.
Not every grower. It's the same thing. Not okay, I have a terroir. Not every terroir is a great terroir.
I love this. This is refreshing because and that's why I love wine is because hopefully people can get together, share some bottles, and share some opinions. Not a whole lot of fights break out at wine tastings because it doesn't do that to your brain typically. But yeah, we have these terms that we throw around, terroir, and then people fight for their AVA or whatever here in the States. I'm like, did you really need to fight for that?
Well, people end up, I mean, I have all sorts of psychological theories about it, but there's so many people who, first of all, if you sell these wines, whatever it is, you have an investment in it. You've bought their argument. You want to believe in it. Wine is sold because of a story and a passion. But wine is, in some ways, wine becomes... Try the Talquerie next. The Talquerie, the middle one. It's one of my. It's a very interesting. I'm going to pause for the Talquerie. It's a female grape variety. So so it doesn't self-pollinate, and it has to be interplanted often with the Chinabuli, so that when the bees go around, they can go from one vine to another. It's a very distinctive grape variety. that I find very expressive.
Oh my God, this is a beautiful red.
It has a good bit of tannin, but bright raspberry flavors. I don't want to tell you what you're going to taste. You can decide. But it's a very expressive wine.
Kind of reminded me of and this is a brain thing. We relate it to things we've had in the past because but it's along the lines of like a Mencia, Formia, Ribera Sacra. I'm getting that type of flavor profile.
Absolutely right. I think it's a little lighter bodied.
Yeah, but
and the tannins are maybe a little more fine grained. It's not an heavily extracted wine.
Yeah, right.
But has a very clear, pretty structure, and because of the it has, like the Mencia, they're pretty high acidity, firm tannins. The wines you can hold on to them for a couple of years. But I think it's a remarkable wine. But and it reflects, and it's terroir reflective. If up in higher elevations, much more acidity, more mineral content. In warmer, more exposed areas, it will be fleshier and much broader. But I love Tauquerie. But not every terroir is a great terroir. But what I was getting is that people end up fighting about wine with an almost religious passion.
Yes. Yeah. I just read a book. It was actually about racism, but it taught how people talk about certain things and they don't realize they're talking religiously. They're not actually talking logically.
Absolutely. Right.
Right. Like if you break it down, like what a religion is, like so many, like you said, arguments of so many things as well right now. People are like, you're a religious zealot. You're not.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. They can't. And okay, I understand that you're selling this wine and you believe in this wine, but at the same time, somebody look in the final analysis with any bottle of wine, any glass of wine. I can't be in your mouth and know what you're tasting and how this affects your tongue, your saliva, your body chemistry, your sense memories, positive, negative. Those are going to completely change. We're going to have completely different subjective opinions, feelings about the wine. Now, there are other elements of a wine that are facts,
right.
And we, and that's part of what the training is about. To say, okay, because that's why I can say this is an average wine. This is not a great wine,
right.
Whatever it might be, but I love it.
Right.
Or this is a very fine wine. It's not my style. There's certain grape varieties I can respect. A really good example of whatever this grape variety might be.
Right.
But it's not for me, and it's very important to be able to articulate why you like something or why you don't. When somebody says, I can't stand it, and you say why, and they say, I just don't like it, and they're a professional.
So frustrating.
Forget it. Then they don't add anything to. You can't talk to them because they don't even know.
Right.
They're not clear thinkers.
I agree. It's so true. Like I tell people all the time, like, listen, the thing is, it's just what you said. You could have like somebody might not like DRC, and that's fine. Is the wine the learning is the wine true to the terroir with the winemaking philosophy? Check. I don't like that particular wine for me. But I respect it, and I could say that's a really good wine.
Absolutely.
Not for me, but most people can't. Like you said, it's just like,
that's right.
And that's the worst. People they're like, you like Rhone wines. They're too high on alcohol. I'm like, well, that's those grapes like heat. Like, don't just throw up your hand. You don't have to like it, but you don't have to be like, oh.
That's right. Besides, if everything was the same, that would be really boring. But that's
Come
on.
You know what? We're gonna take a quick break.
Sure.
And then we'll come right back with more Lisa. I'm just having too much fun. Okay, we're back. Let's talk about your career switch to wine. I read that you said life is too short to be consigned to a life of vodka, potatoes, and litigation.
Correct.
So, first of all, having graduated from law school, but you how'd you get into litigation? Because that's like why you want to go to law school. Like, I want to go to court. I want to be like, objection. You know.
Well, that's what I did when I got out of law school. But I never really wanted to do that. And to be perfectly frank, it's too much agita, too much fighting. You know,
exactly.
You know what? People want you to do this, and I realized that I needed to acquire a certain skill set. But to do that for the rest of my life, forget about it. You know, I have enough arguments even in my own head. I don't want to get paid to argue any further. And so, that was when I then went into academia.
Okay.
But then, there was a point at which, basically, I had this epiphany. I ran into 3 friends that had been from law school, and they all were law faculty, and they all were miserable. And one looked like she had walked out of Auschwitz and developed Tourette's, and 2 other guys, one sat at his desk and at faculty meetings. He would sit there looking at everybody in the room and trying to figure out who voted against his appointment. And then the third guy was at another school where, I mean, we had been to Georgetown. We had been at Yale together too. He got his PhD in economics, and then he was somewhere where he was denied tenure, and it was racist. So anyway, and he was then probably going back to litigation. But all these people were really angry, and I thought, these are my 3 friends. They're all miserable. Is this what I want to do with my life? And I felt like Anna Karenina in a way that, but my train had entered the station, and I decided to change trains. I was not going to get in front of it. I decided it was time to change trains. Yeah. And I was lucky I was on a fellowship at the time. And, fellowships, it's not a lot of money, but I was able to step back and say, okay, if you're not going to do this, what might it be? And I had the luxury of taking some time to think some things through and try to think outside the box.
I can totally relate. I remember she was like the first day of law school, like orientation. And the dean comes in our class, the 200 of us, and he's like, take a look around. These are going to be your colleagues for the next 30 years. And literally, I said to myself, there's no way I'm going to be working with around these fucking assholes for 30 years. That was the first day. Like, we hadn't even been to class. Like, I was like, these fucking assholes? Nah. So I knew I was never going to practice at that point. So I can totally relate. But so you're on a fellowship. And then what happened? I mean, you're taking that step back and you're breathing. You're probably still tasting wine. Like what?
Well, look. By that time, I've been
collecting, right?
Collecting, drinking, obviously, and I thought, do I be a doctor like my father always wanted? Like I thought about all the things, and then one day I was on the subway, and I thought, what about going into the wine industry? And I did a little bit of research into it, and
a little bit of research for any lawyer is like people talk about. I do my research on this shit. Like that's one thing I love about law school is like you learn how to do research. So that's for any lawyer. For Lisa, I'm sure a little bit of research could be a treatise.
But in the end, it was very easy for me to get a job because at the time, it was bottom fishing, and you saw my effectively my CV. So I'm a show dog with a pretty fancy pedigree. It was right. It was not that hard. Really, they want somebody who's not going to steal, doesn't do drugs, doesn't have an alcohol problem, and you get things done. And you looked at my CV, and I checked those boxes. Right. So it was pretty easy for me to get a job, and and I went into it sort of. I straddled for a while. I was still doing some academic stuff on.
What was like your first wine job?
I was working with a small Italian importer.
Doing what? I mean, this is so interesting. Like most people's like, yeah, like I walked into a liquor store and I like what was so how were you working with this importer?
I mean, it was ridiculous because what did I know at the time? Nothing. But I knew a lot more than other people, and I helped him write. It was about having sales reps have the right information about the history of the winery, the terroir, helping him prepare stuff, and then go on market visits with the local distributor to help them sell them and make them. It's really the sales reps would probably think I was a hindrance, but it was to make sure that they paid attention to this guy's niche Italian portfolio.
Okay. Right. So kind of, I mean, like it education, like so you're taking from that because you'd come.
It's in the end. it is still about education. People look. There are people who are going to like to drink wine because of the effect of it, and there's certain people who, they get really interested in cars when they need to buy one, and then they don't really care about cars very much. And some people are like that about wine, and then some people, for cars are just a place to, a way to get somewhere, and for some people wine is a way to get drunk or to relax. But once people get hooked, and it's certainly people who are selling wine, it's this 1% talking to the 1% of wine geeks.
It is.
And and you have to find a way to both be general and specific, and to feed. In some ways, it's like the Kinks. You give people what they want.
Right.
And but finding the story, finding the passion, finding the information is important.
So you said you were kind of double dipping. You had one toe in. You're still working in academia. Right. Kind of like, did you continue work with that importer? What was like kind of the next thing? Did you get like another project?
No, I worked with him for a little bit, and then I ended up working again with. I stayed mostly in distribution.
Okay.
In different capacities, often always with some degree of education, because in the end, I wasn't from a winemaking background. I didn't work in restaurants. I did work some retail, but I never worked in restaurants. I think restaurants would probably pay me to leave, not to work for them. No question about it. So I didn't. I didn't have that experience, and admittedly, I thought, who am I? Who am I to tell you that I think this wine is good? I had huge imposter syndrome. And the only way for me to be confident and to say that I can tell you about this wine was for me to become educated. I mean, you can see in my CV, I believe in education.
Yeah.
And so I have more letters after my name than in my name. and so then, I found out up at the MW, and so it was this path to learn more, to ask, first to be able to explain to people why a wine is interesting, or why it's interesting to me. And then also, I could see how winemakers will tell you whatever they think you want to hear, and they can figure out how to snow you pretty quickly. And over time, I began to see, I could see these conversations where I would talk to winemakers and I would ask them questions, and they would see I was really interested, and they would give me answers, and then I would try to dive deeper and deeper, and then there would be this point where, oh my God, they knew more than I did, and I could see where I couldn't ask that next question, and they could snow me. So then it became this game, okay, how can I always up my game to ask the hard questions?
Wow, that's so interesting. Now you talked about, and we're getting into the master wine, but something you said you didn't work. You worked a little retail, but you never did hospitality per se.
Right.
I think it's interesting that your first job was with a distributor, but I mean, with your CV, it makes sense. How I'll wait.
It showed a lack of commitment on my part. I was just checking it out. I wasn't certain yet.
It's like double Dutch. You am I going to jump in?
That's
on the side. I'll hold that question because I want to do the master wine, unpack it. So, master of wine, who does that?
Crazy people.
So when you entered the program, there was less than 300 in the world, right?
Yeah, there were fewer than 300. Okay. Now there are 400.
I know it's not like a whole large number. But what is that like?
It's daunting. It's having a second job. It's having a mistress on the side. It takes over your life, but it's also an extraordinarily invigorating, challenging program, because you realize how vast the world of wine is, how you'll never really master it. And and everybody, and we talk about what is it to be an MW, and you're like, okay, I can have a lot of knowledge, I can be a walking encyclopedia, but that's actually kind of boring because you can look it up. But it's more about, I have this information, and how can I articulate it to you? How can I tell you why this information matters? And how can I play around with it, like, so that I have the agility to say that, okay, how are Georgia and Armenia different? Because I know them both intimately, and people would lump them together, and I could say, you know what, actually, yes, they live in the same neck of the woods, but there are remarkable differences, and that highlights how the wines differ, and that brings more, I'll say, color to the party. But it's really, really hard work, and particularly it doesn't matter, both for the tasting and the theory, and then even for the final research paper, it's hard to overestimate the amount of focus that is required and dedication to go through the program.
So I think I looked at it at one point. I went to the website. I was like, fuck that. I'm done with school. Like lawyer.
Sure, yeah.
But there are some cool stuff. Like you guys go on trips. Like your cohort goes on trips, right? Like there are some cool.
Well, one of the great things is that when you get together, there are a bunch of people, and okay, we've passed this really hard exam, but we've gotten together, and we're all from different places, pretty much, and we share a passion for something about which we know something. And so when we travel together, we actually can be a pretty fun bunch most of the time. But we're all characters. So that's one of the things. I mean, when I remember when I was studying, there was a particular MW who was a Scot and said, when you're writing your theory exam, you don't just want to write like you're writing out of an encyclopedia. You have to have flair. We're looking, and we want to see that you're a character, that you're somewhat interesting, and you're going to say something that no one else has thought of before. You're going to show personality and so forth. And so, yeah, there are people who are definite characters, and no fisticuffs, but heated arguments. And we can have a good time. And then when we travel, the questions that are asked are of a deeper level than somebody who's, like I can't go on a consumer wine trip, for example, or even or people who have never taken some serious wine classes, because it's you don't know until you know.
Are you in the tasting room rolling your eyes?
Oh yeah, I mean, you have no idea.
No, I hear you.
Yeah. You have no idea, especially because I have no poker face, right? So I'm bad. I'm bad.
MW's like, so I've had Mary Ewing Mulligan on, I have Michael Juergens on, who's an MW candidate. It's very interesting people, but it's like a bunch of Mensa people drinking wine. Is like that MW community is kind of like you listen. There's no cliff notes for this shit.
There's not.
You have to have a certain beyond perseverance, but you gotta have a certain level of intelligence to even try and do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to have focus.
I've seen some master somms, and I love them, but you can charm your way through that one.
It's very different.
Yeah, it's very different.
Right.
Yeah, very different.
Well, you need writing skills, and there's the argument that you don't. If you can't write clearly, you don't think clearly. And it is a written exam, and you have to write clearly and logically. And then, as I said, there's all this understanding, but you have to understand the application of all of that. I'm sorry, so there's all this knowledge. What does that mean? What's the so what? Okay, you know all this stuff, but what does this really mean? And how do you play around with it? How do you compare one region to another, or large wineries from to big wineries? And you need to know about how wine is made all around the world. You can't just be focused on how wine is made in your little winery outside of Salt Lake City, for example. I mean, you made me an expert on your terroir, but this is about broad knowledge. And so what you're picking up now is the Armenian wine, another indigenous grape variety. It's their leading red variety, the Areni variety. And this is actually made in stainless steel.
Okay. And this is really good to have you on here, and bring in Armenian wine, so people can understand that there are better exports than the Kardashians out of Armenia.
There's no question that there are different exports than the Kardashians. Indeed.
But I'm surprised if they sold some wine from Armenia, that shit would sell because they can market. They can market anything, man.
I think those conversations may not be that far away, but I'm not privy to them. But I'll just say, this wine, the brand is called Zulal, which means purity, and so I think
that can't be a Kardashian brand. No,
that was my
yeah.
So you said it. Yeah. So in any event, but you're going to get a very pure. There's no oak on this wine.
The Kardashian wine would be like very California. It would be like really voluptuous, oaky, in your face.
There's a Yiddish word, ungepatsk.
It'd be very ungepatz.
Too much makeup. Yeah. Too much maquillage. Actually,
absolutely.
But I think again, Armenia is coming from a very different place in terms of how Georgia is very much homegrown, own varieties. Armenia is largely being supported now by
spicy
expat, very spicy. Yeah. By expats or who are repatriating to try to build up, and they've made money elsewhere in the world.
They're going. Kim's going. They're going.
And they're coming back, and they're trying to build up this, bring back their homeland. So it's coming from a very different place.
It's going to have this wine must have a huge market in Glendale, California.
Actually, yes, California, Southern California,
it's Glendale.
Massachusetts.
It's Glendale.
Yeah.
I lived in.
Okay. You know better than I do.
Yeah, it's Glendale. Is a huge, and that and we were talking about America. That's what's so awesome. Like I actually worked in Beverly Hills for some time, and like that's when I didn't know how many Persians had come over with Shahram. And then I worked with an Armenian for the first. I was like, holy, this is really cool. You know. It's like the only place in the world that this exists is, here.
Yeah, right.
All right, so had to have a little fun with the Kardashians. So how long was it actually how long did it take you to complete your MW program?
4 years. I started I became an MW 2006 and started 2002, so 4 years.
Okay, so is it timed, or it's just kind of like a thesis you finish when you finish, or like what is it?
Well, they've actually changed it because there used to be what we used to call MW tourists. There were people there was a lot of prestige in saying, I'm in the MW program.
Of course.
But the truth of the matter is that those of us who participate in education, we do this for free. And it's all volunteer. It's a not-for-profit organization. And you want to put the time and the energy into somebody who's really dedicated to finish. And so they've changed it so that you can't be in the MW program for 10 years.
Gotcha.
There are different goalposts put into place. There are certain assessments and so forth. So when I did it, the first year I took the exam, I passed the tasting. The next year I passed the theory. And then there's a final paper that you write. And you have to, I forget what exactly the rules are now, but you have to have passed at least part of the exam, either the theory or the tasting, to move on to start your final paper.
Delicious, really silky. Silky,
but still with fresh acidity and spicy.
Yeah, but good acid, but like really silky.
Silky, soft tannins, very elegant.
Yes.
And very approachable.
Right. I mean, so like for people who like, if you're at a different level, the best. I mean, these for most of you, like if you haven't tried like a Minthia or anything, but like you're gonna think Pinot Noir is what I would tell people who are just.
In some ways, it's softer. As I said, both of these wines are less extracted.
Yes.
Than wines from Spain.
It's hot as hell in Spain, though.
It's hot as hell, right? Well, and actually, this Areni. Most of the soils are actually volcanic, but there's some of the highest. I forget exactly what the altitude is, but these are the Georgian wines are all anywhere from 600 to 800 meters above sea level.
Wow!
But the wines from Armenia are considerably higher. I think it might even
and volcanic, right? So so I was kind of getting like that Mount Etna little vibe.
Yes, you get it. You feel in the mid palate.
Yep. Yeah. Right. So. You finished in 2006. What is that? When did you open Taste World? What was your next step after getting your MW?
Well, I was working with a large distributor at the time.
Okay.
And then I could see when the economy was going south, and I was done with that business. I wanted to move on and do something else, and so I was sort of sniffing around from 2008 to find wineries that I had been working with that I knew were unhappy and didn't understand the American market because it's a complicated market, and even though they still think that they don't understand that 50 states is 50 countries, but in any event,
I know,
and they all think system, and they all think that they can sit at home and decide what's happening here, but I found a few that often had a connection. Actually, they knew what the MW was, and they allowed me to jump ship. And that's how it worked.
Okay. And then so is that why you created Tasting Works, was to do that?
To work with I worked with some very, very fancy initially French wines, champagnes, burgundies, some from the Loire Valley as well. To figure out what sort of distributor alignment should be, how should they promote themselves in the market, and so forth and so on, what their packaging. I mean, everything from not so much at that with the French, it wasn't how was the wine made, but certainly how was the wine presented, and then with some Italian producers, sometimes it was tweaking about how the wine is made because some wines were too dilute and they needed to do some work in the vineyard, make wines that had a little more stuffing, at least for the price point they were looking at, and then within the mix of all of that, that was when I was asked to be on this USAID trip to Georgia. There were a number of so-called wine experts that were invited to the country to do a tour of Georgia.
Okay.
And make recommendations as to how Georgia should move forward as a wine industry. And I was asked to be on that trip, and during that trip, the Georgians met me and realized that I had been there 30 years before during a very dark period. And that was when they approached me and said, would you work with us? And so that started another relationship that has continued. I worked with the National Wine Agency for several years, and now I'm working more with some private companies, giving them, again, advice on what to do in the American market. And then within the mix of all of that, I guess it was several trips there when I realized that, look, I'm a book person, and I like books, reference books, and I thought every wine country that matters has a book about it, and there was no book on Georgian wine, and that was when I realized that I was probably the only person who was. I thought I'm an MW, and I don't necessarily speak the language very well, but I have a long vision of this country and its history, and I realized that I looked around and I thought there's nobody else better situated than me to write this book. I should just do it, and so that was when I embarked on that project, really starting in 2014-15, and then ultimately got the Fulbright to go over there and do.
Oh, that's what you got the Fulbright.
The first one was to teach. The first Fulbright was as a lawyer, and the second was to do the research on the book. Right.
She got two Fulbrights, y'all.
I went to school for theater.
I don't even want to tell you what my undergrad degree was in. Not one, but two Fulbrights. Yeah. And that's gangster. And to study fucking wine.
Yeah, but for Georgia, it was a big deal.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
Now, did I read on the internet somewhere, like, you don't know, but, like, isn't some of the oldest, like, Georgia has some of the oldest wine culture in the world? Is that kind of true? Is there there's some truth in it? There's some truthiness.
There's truthiness to it. There was a Russian, now I can't, a scientist named Vavilov, who had these theories. He had maps.
He had a brother named Pavlov. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. But
had maps of where I think he had 5 or 6 different regions of the world, where grain was first developed, where fruits were first developed. I can't remember what the different food stuffs are. And he highlighted, he had this circle around Transcaucasia, which spans Armenia, north, I guess, eastern Turkey, Georgia, and maybe part of Syria. I forget, northern Iraq, something like that. I can't remember exactly, because it's a rough area. And that is posited to be the history, the development of Vitis vinifera. There is evidence earlier of wine being made in China, but not 100% grape wine. It was mixed with honey or mead or something else.
Right.
So, and all of this is only the science that we know is only good until the next experiment, right?
Yeah.
But Georgia has what I'll say about Georgia and how Armenia is different. Georgia has the longest unbroken history of wine making that's documented.
Wow.
They have evidence for 8,000 years of wine making history, wine consumption, okay? In what you see in Armenia in the Vaidzor cave there is winemaking equipment that goes back. I want to say it's 6,000 years. It's not quite as back as Georgia. Georgia, what they found are clay pots that have, through bee pollen and flower pollen, there's evidence, and as I said, there's evidence of winemaking. So it's definitely in this region, and whatever happened, because there's a fellow from the University of Toronto. There was also this, along with Vavilov, there's this theory. It was called the ETC, the early Trans-Caucasian culture, I think is what it is. And there's this theory that there were they were nomads that went from Transcaucasia down probably to the Middle East and ultimately into Western
Asia
Europe,
Minor,
all the way down around. And they were not warring people. And what was believed that they came to countries. They weren't countries at the time, but they came to other. They were nomads. They came to new places, but they didn't fight. And there was no evidence of war, and the reason they were accepted was that they brought something that people wanted.
They had the wine.
They had the wine, right? they brought grapevines with them, right? And that's the notion. So it's Transcaucasia, and both of these countries have that. And then of course we move forward to Christian culture and the significance of wine in Christian culture. Turkey and the other areas are out of the running in the sense just because of the Ottoman Empire and their prohibition. Even if they invented alembic stills, the Ottoman Empire and Islam, which outlawed the production of wine and spirits.
And that's where we get Shiraz from.
Apparently that is not correct.
That's why I'm here, to learn.
Apparently that is not correct. I don't know where that's a myth. It's just
guys.
It's an association that we've made.
Exactly.
But it has
Thank you.
It has no relation to.
There you go.
To
has no relation to Shiraz as a Persian. Yeah, there you
go.
There we go. Debunked. That's what we do here. We try and debunk shit about wine.
Next.
I know. So let's talk about. I read in your intro, you guys. I did not know they were professors of wine and beer.
Sure. Well, Roger de Gorn, maybe Master Sommelier. There are plenty of programs. Cornell.
You know what?
CIA. Hospitality departments there, and that's.
But I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I was just a buddy of mine. He is actually going to Cornell School of Hospitality. It's a huge class. He's going to talk about he has a lot of experience with Italian wines. We talk about the expert, but he does. I mean, that's all he does. He sells. He's got like a bunch of restaurants, and his kid is at the school up there, and he's like that class. Like it's like. I think it's like something like there's 3,000 pours before each class because the number of students is like a big lecture, and all the students have to pour, and there's like they taste like 6 wines, and it ended up being like I think it's like 500 students, so it's like 3,000 fucking glasses of wine, and then somebody's got to watch them.
I was going to say they got a lot of dishwashers, I hope.
Yeah.
But sure, but any school that has a hospitality department has.
Well, I went to state school. I didn't go to like these fancy schmancy schools.
Well, there was no professor of wine at Georgetown, let me tell you. Much less at Yale.
Yeah. I'm sure the dean had a nice stash of wine there, or the president for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So what was that like? Because even just talking to you, like you're fun. You and feel like what's it like being a teacher? Like I've heard like.
Well, that actually NYIT was really interesting because most of the time when you're teaching in the MW program, you're talking to as you described them, but wine geeks and people who are really engaged and they've gone to college and so forth. And at NYIT, I think a lot of the kids took the class because it sounded like it might be fun, but the kids in the class. There was one white guy, and he was ex-military, and he was from somewhere in the Midwest, and the rest of the students were all first-generation Americans, and they did not grow up in wine consuming homes. They knew nothing about wine, and they came from all the places that people that immigrate to New York. And I was taking them to places in the world that they had never heard. It was another world, and trying to get them excited about something. I think they thought it was going to be like Rocks for Jocks or something, and I made them work, which was a whole other issue. And frankly, I really thought the students hated my guts, and because I was hard. I'm not an easy teacher. But I found out at the end that they actually really liked me, and they wanted to take me out at the end of class. I was like, both times I was like, I couldn't believe this. But I got them excited about wine, and some of them really got into it, and they figured out how to study, and they figured out, I opened another world for them, and because wine is associated with being, whether it's a white person's drink or a rich person's drink or whatever it would be. Okay. MBA guys are changing a lot of that these days, right?
Well,
it's
a wealth drink.
It's a wealth drink.
It is that because I talk to people. I'm like, yeah, people like. I'm like, yeah, them brothers are like all millionaires, bro.
Right.
Like they're not going to a wine shop on a Saturday tasting the $12 bottle of wine.
Right.
Like they got signed.
That's right.
Someone put a great bottle of wine, and they're like, "I'm buying that. I have all this money." So
it's a wealth. It's a class.
Right. It's a class thing.
It's a class thing.
Right.
But I tried to explain to them that it doesn't have to be a
class
thing.
I mean, exactly. Like
it's as open
at the end of the day. Listen, you could go buy vodka, or you could buy a bottle of wine.
Right.
It's in the store. That's all.
And it was actually really interesting because it was wine, spirits, and
yes,
wine, beer,
it
and
was
spirits.
Wine, beer, and spirits. Yes.
And it was really interesting with these kids because, particularly with the spirits, I would have them taste lots of different things, and I would say, "Oh, this is from this distillery in Colorado." I did all this local stuff.
Gotcha.
They didn't know, and stuff would be blind. They wouldn't know where anything came from. But when it came down to what they liked the best, it would be Johnny Walker.
Mm-hmm.
It would be, I don't know,
Hennessy.
You name the big Diageo brand that has dialed in to what the consumer likes. That's what they wanted.
Alizé.
Whatever it would be, right? And I would say, but I got some of them into the wine. I got some of them into spirits. I got some of them into like whatever beer it would be. I didn't care. I didn't care what they liked. I wanted them to feel that this was a world that was open to them, not closed.
Right.
And they should feel empowered to go out and say, I know, or even to say to some, to ask a some and say, yeah, I've taken a wine class and I've liked this, I've liked that. I empowered them to ask a simple question.
There you go.
I like this, I like that. And what do you suggest? I don't like this, I don't like that. You don't have to pretend you know more. But you can give a little. This is how to give a little clue, and they appreciate that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I worked a lot of retail, and it's very interesting how people don't want to give you any information. Like you want to help them, but it's like so hard. Like to get them like.
They're embarrassed.
So I'm like, do you like strawberries, blueberries, or cherries? Like I have to break it down. I'm like, I don't care what fruit you like. Like I'm trying to help. Do you like, do you like tea? No. Okay. Do you like lemons? I'm trying to give them things, and then you didn't work a lot, but this is the most frustrating question for all members. And you say to people, and it's again because there are great wines in every price range except for $2.99. Victoria James she's like if you want to spend $5 on a bottle of wine, just get beer. Don't drink wine. Unless you're in Spain, unless you're in Europe,
Yeah.
But that being said, you ask someone how much do you want to spend, and they go not much. Not much is not a number. Just you could say $10, and I'm going to go find you something.
Right.
Eric, your friend Eric Asimov, I'm sure he writes a list. The best wines are $15, but you got to give me a price. Don't say not much.
Absolutely. You know what? Well, the thing is that people are intimidated.
Yeah.
They're intimidated on every level. They're intimidated. They're afraid you're gonna judge them for how much money they don't have.
Right.
You're gonna judge them for what they don't know. You're gonna judge them. It doesn't. There's so many inhibitions about wine. The problem is that wine is just complicated. That's the biggest problem. It's hard to demystify it because it is complicated.
Yeah. You need to drink more, all
Yep.
you people out there. So you are, oh my God, just reading the bio, like you're also a speaker and an author. You alluded to the book. How long did it take you to write the book?
So I really started. What? Look, the book is informed by my experiences that go back to the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
But doing the hard research on the book started about 2014, and I finished it, I guess, in 2020. So, but it was that the year. Admittedly, there were a few years when I was going to Georgia a lot for various work I was doing, and then I got that Fulbright. That enabled me to go for longer research trips over the course of the viticultural year to see what people were really doing, to taste wines over the course of their maturation, to meet more and more people and travel around the country and see, more that, every time you go, it is a very, Georgia's a very tiny country. It's a very rich country with a lot of nuances, and what I've and absolutely, I don't even know how many degrees of separation. But the first time I went to Georgia, there was a woman who was a professor at George Mason, and I was living in D.C., and somebody said she's the American authority on Georgia. So I went to talk to her, and she had, written this book, this article that ultimately was published about how to drink like a Georgian, and she gave me the best advice I'd ever gotten about Georgia. And she said, when you go there and you're going to ask a question, Georgians will tell you that something is true. They'll answer you. They will aver that it is true. They will swear on their mother's life that it is true, right? And it is not true. and you will ask 6 people, and they'll all give you that. You're going to check your sources. They're all going to say the same thing, and they're all wrong. And no one is going to, and no one's going to help you find the right answer. Okay? And they don't. And then part of it, she said, they don't, because they don't know.
Right.
In some ways, because during the Soviet period, there's so many myths, so many legends, so much about, even for me, how much I was taught about Georgia that was through Russian eyes. So for me, there was this stripping away of so much myth and propaganda to get underneath what was the truth, and that was really hard. That was really hard. That was the challenge, because often there were things that maybe they're not positive to this, maybe it had to do with the fact that, like, they didn't want to say anything positive about Stalin, with good reason. But Stalin did a lot of good for Georgia, actually. He because he was Georgian, he built the Georgian brand. Georgian wine, there's a guy, I can't think of his name offhand, but he recently wrote a book about the branding of Georgian food in the Soviet period. And Stalin had his chefs and his wines and whatnot.
I'm sure I'm not the only person that knows Stalin was Georgian who's listening to this. Like, just got another little fact.
Yeah, Stalin was Georgian. Yeah. His real name, Stalin is man of steel. Stalin. His real name was Yosef Jugashvili. Okay?
Wow.
So, and he had his chefs and bakers and wines shipped to Moscow. And all of his dinners were catered by with Georgia. He was a simple guy from this little town outside of Tbilisi. And so even in Russia, going in the Soviet Union, everybody knew the best food, even if there is great food, because it's all sort of Mediterranean, Central Asian influence. Tajikistan, all these stans, right? There's amazing food and Persian, Turkish influences. No, everyone knew that Georgian food and wine was the best because of Stalin. More than that, because his underlings knew he liked Georgian wine, when they were creating this command economy and they were telling people what to plant. In Georgia, they decided, they knew which wines he liked, and so they planted Georgian varieties. Okay? Now, I also think that in some ways it was Georgian pride. They were Georgians making these determinations, and in some ways it was like this civil disobedience, like we're going to stand up for ourselves, and we're going to plant our own varieties. But there were other areas that did not do that, and even in Moldova in the 60s, when they decided to modernize, they ripped almost all of their native varieties up and planted Cabernet and other French varieties. So there's a lot of Georgian establishment of itself, but it had to do with Stalin. They don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's true.
I just had a flash of a poster. It was like, indigenous varieties of the world unite.
Yes. We can call Morrissey and see whether he'll record that one.
Yeah. And we
shoplifters of the world unite, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we could hook up like some type of NFT, and we'll all be rich. I'll cut you in on the deal, Glo, since you came in today. So, what's your favorite thing to do though inside of this business? Is it teaching? Is it visiting vineyards? Is it your writing? Like, is it speaking? You spoke at the Smithsonian.
Writing's hard work.
It is.
Writing's a bitch. Okay.
That's why I have a podcast.
Writing is really hard work. Though in the writing there is actually, but when you have a project like writing, there are times when you leave it aside and you're working through a problem, and then you have your so-called brilliant idea, or the things come together. There's a synthesis, and that's really exciting. But I don't like speaking so much in large groups. Mm-hmm. I like to feed off an audience. Yeah. I like teaching is the most exciting because there are people who are interested, and I do hope that I can inspire them to explore something and to step outside of their comfort zone and see something and actually empower them to make their own judgments. They don't have, getting back to what we were saying earlier, they don't have to like what I like. Mm-hmm. But I want them to be open to try something, and then even to try something again, because some of these wines are different. And, it's like the first time you taste umami, or the first time if you've never had beer and you have this thing in your mouth, and what is it? And it takes some time to appreciate it. And, what I often say is that, wines are people, or like people. And, we might meet on a certain day, and, we might not like each other because, who knows what happened to you in the morning, and you're in a bad humor, and we didn't get along. But, or maybe something, who knows what happened, and we didn't get off to the best start. And maybe the bottle was having a bad day, right? Because, wines go through their phases. Right. So always be open to try something again. Try it first time, try it again. And then if you're really against it, okay, that's fine. But keep an open mind. And I always want people to have an open mind. I try to have one.
Yeah, I do too.
It's hard. It's hard when you get older, But,
I know. But trust me, I was talking to my best friend. I was like, "Damn, dude, we're getting old." My roommate from law school. I'm just like, sometimes I was like, "Okay, you're being old."
Yeah, but you got to remember. Minds are like parachutes. They only function when they're open.
Right.
That's.
I was like, you only need them when you jump out of an airplane. Then my mind is strapped like a no. Actually, I need to jump out of an airplane. I haven't done that in a few years. So like you've been consuming wine for a few decades now. Like, what's your deal? What like you're a master of wine, so like but everybody like has their favorite. Like what's your go-to? Like what is Lisa's like? Like Lisa's just like, I'm a sucker for this. Like I just love a good this.
Well, first of all, I'm maybe unusual. Well, first of all, the wonderful thing about ultimately becoming a master wine is that you get to drink what you like, right? You don't have to.
Exactly.
You don't have to. Oh, I have to learn what this is. All right. You can drink what you like, and then I'm going to sound like a really boring wine professional, because what do I drink more than anything else is white wines, and I don't want to say high acid wines because I think wines.
Because that's
it's a trendy thing. It's a trendy thing, and it's like, no, a wine needs to be balanced. The acidity needs to be balanced in the wine. But yes, I drink a lot of dry Riesling. I drink a lot of Cabernet Riesling. I drink a lot of Austrian and German Riesling. A lot of Riesling.
We're going to get you at the next Riesling study. You'll love it. It's just amazing. Amazing. But it's not trendy. See, that's the thing, though, right? I love what you just said there. Like, acid is so trendy. There is like a non-alcoholic wine now called acid lead that it's like
no.
Come on,
well, there was this. There was a company called Acid Inc. And I got it, but a lot of these wines are I'm an acid freak. No, a wine needs to be balanced. But I'm also somebody who doesn't want to drink the same thing every day. So yes, I do drink.
But it's such a lot
of Riesling,
but it is so food friendly.
A lot of Chablis,
right?
A lot of Chenin.
I love Chenin.
Lots of blends. Yeah, I had a Chenin. I had a Sauvignon. 2 bottles of Sauvignon last night with friends, not just me. But I do drink lots of classic white rice, Pecorino. I love.
Oh my God.
Vernaccia. I
do know wines. I've had all these type of grapes.
Right. I
love Pecorino. So many people don't know about Pecorino. I love Pecorino.
Torre de Beatti's
no relation to the cheese.
No, but wonderful producer, Torre de Beatti.
You know what I want? I haven't had yet. It's not a Pecorino, and it's not. But I want a Emilio Pepe Trebbiano d'Abruzzo.
They're interesting.
I heard they're interesting wines.
They're interesting wines.
And I love what you said. Like I did.
Pricey.
I know. I looked them up. I'm like, and that becomes a certain thing. Like, with like the pricing. Like I'm like 120 bucks for a Trebbiano. Like most of that shit's usually jug wine. I'm like,
well, they're interesting. Well, look, it's a curiosity. They've had these wines.
For curiosity, yes.
Right, and you can taste them. And this producer has made wines that you can taste back decades. And they had been imported by Polliner, and you go and taste these wines. And I've drunk them, I've tasted them, I've enjoyed them. Now, when it comes time to buy it, like for me, to buy a bottle like that for $100 and something,
I'm not going to do it though. That's what I said. My thing is, I'm going to find someone who has one, but like,
or I'm going to get a bunch of friends, and we're all gonna like chip in together and see what we think. Right. And that's a curiosity.
And that's just a curiosity. It was not a bottle I'd buy on my own. Right. But I do love a good Montepulciano d'Abruzzo.
I don't drink so much of those. I love Chianti. I just love Chianti.
See, now most Chiantis for me, it could be I haven't had the right ones. Like they're just a little too something. There's something in them.
Oh,
I don't want to be.
It has to be the producer. It has to be the region.
Right. You gotta know.
Yeah, you gotta know. But.
Chianti, and that's
Chianti
the thing.
Chianti Classico
can be. You gotta fucking know, right? Like, there's so much to
hard,
know.
Which is why you gotta go to a place like. Whether it's Italian wine merchants, you go to a specialty shop or you find a merchant that you know and say, this is what I if you had a bad Chianti, keep record of it. What was it? Right. And this was bad. I heard Chianti's great. What am I missing? Right. Recommend a good one to me. That's what that's kind of what you need to do. But I was gonna say I drink a lot of sherry. I love.
Oh yeah, no. I have a good friend. She loves sherry. She imports Spanish wines, and a lot has to do with like sometimes I tell people like. People are like, why do you love California wines? Like, because it was like the first wine country I visited. Like, so like I have I have an affinity for nostalgia. Like you said, like what is going on in your brain while you're tasting it? You don't know what's in my mouth and my brain.
Well,
right?
and we look, we all bat for the home team, right? We all root for the home team. And I started drinking, with California wines too, and evolved away from them because also they moved in this Parker style and whatnot. But again, keeping the open mind styles, and then they went to the In Pursuit of Balance, where there was maybe a lot of pursuit but no balance. There was really all this acid.
All pursuit.
But I always go back and taste American wines. Wines from Oregon can be fantastic. There are wines from Washington State that can be fantastic. And then no one wants to spend a lot of money, and you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money, but I love Zinfandel. I really love Zin.
That's what got me into red wine.
Yeah.
People don't even know about Zinfandel, I think.
It can be a very terroir reflective
exactly.
grape. Look at whether it's you're talking about Morgan Peterson at Bedrock or the Turley wines.
He just made a white Zinfandel. I just saw today.
Morgan's hilarious.
He is hilarious. He's like, I never thought two things. He was Bedrock and White Zin, but it's a historic vineyard.
Okay, sure.
Out of Amador.
Okay.
And it's more of an orange wine, and we'll see how it turns out.
But these are very, it can be the Rodney Dangerfield, another guy who's out of favor, right? But Zin was a Rodney Dangerfield.
You're a hipper who's like canceled and I am, because I just fucking laugh. I'm like, it's a joke. I'm laughing.
But anyway, but Zin, who cares? Nobody cares about Zin, Greg, because it's not prestigious like Cabernet. But they're boisterous. They're fun. Like, I think they're so American.
I remember the first time. I'm not the first time, but like I hadn't had a Zin in a while, and it was a Russian River Zin, and it was like a negociant wine. It was like someone bought it and just slap their own label on it. And that's how they sell their wine. Like, it's declassified from wine. I was like, oh, my God, Russian River Zin is so good. Oh, my God, Dry Creek Valley Zin is so good.
Dry Creek Valley Zin is fantastic.
And you know what? And I have on a pre-order from a wine site that shall remain nameless, but it's an NDA Howell Mountain Zin. Howell Mountain, people. If you know anything about Howell Mountain, like mountain fruit, Zen.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic. Yes. And it's some of the oldest vineyards. that are in California, and a lot of them got ripped up after Judgment of Paris, which is sad. Like there was so many really good Italian varietal vineyards that were there.
Yeah.
A lot of old vine, and the pursuit of the dollar. But yeah, I love that that.
Well, that's what Morgan with the heritage, their heritage site,
yeah.
and their effort has been to retain some of these, and also Robert Bialy,
yep.
All trying to work with some of these old vineyards, and
they're sick. And Joel Peterson has Once and Future.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Awesome wines, yeah. Wines
are sick.
Wines are great.
They're
yes.
so good. You guys need to drink some. Seriously, you need to look up old. You need to start drinking some old vines, Infidel. It'll change your,
And they age. That's the thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he's. I don't know if he's gotten more, but my neighbor, friend Andre Mack, at little plug for Ann Sons. He's got these old California wines on his list.
Yeah.
And some old Zins.
I had.
They're delicious.
This was 1999. I had a 1976 Sebastiani Zinfandel.
Okay.
It was freaking 23 years old, and it's like Bordeaux.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. And that bottle of wine probably costs $3.
Right.
On release.
Right.
And someone had just stored it properly.
Yeah, $2.99. I'm sure it was $2.99.
Yeah. And brought it, and we had a BYOB, and it was like, I was like, whoa. And then I don't know, it's evolved in Zin, but like you said about and then Tegan at Turley.
Aqua.
Yeah, dialing down some of the alcohol and really making it more terroir driven.
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. All right, so a couple more questions before we wrap up. And I let this get away from me. I don't know how. So you were at least 3 years in New Haven.
Yeah.
What was your pizza spot?
The Spot.
So you went to the Spot.
Went to the Spot.
Wow, she knows what's up. So
no line.
Yeah, I know. I know. The Spot was so you got Sally's Pepe's, and the Spot is Pepe's, right?
The Spot is Pepe's,
and it's the original oven.
Yes, right. And they used to have Elm City Brewing. It was a beer, it's long gone. But I gotta say, recently I went to Zapardi's. Have you been to Zapardi's?
No, I gotta go to Zapardi's. Listen,
it's West Haven.
I know where it is. I know exactly where it is. But someone else did a post.
Wow.
And it was another place. The parties I got to go to because my cousins they live in West Haven.
Okay.
I have cousins live. I went to undergrad in New Haven, and didn't even really mess with New Haven pizza. But then I lived there 5-6 years ago. Yeah, because my wife, she's from New Haven, and we reconnected, and so we were modern.
I lived around the corner. I used to. It was easy to go. We lived very close to Modern.
Yeah.
Modern was good. I liked Modern.
But the Spot, that's such a call. And then also I'll give you a tip if you go back for like the Yale reunion for the law of them. Go to Bar, which is downtown.
I've read about it. Yeah, I've read about it.
And get the mashed potato and bacon.
Oh really?
Oh my God.
See, the only.
And I know, and my wife, born and raised in New Haven. And does not like artisanal pizzas, but that mashed potato and bacon.
Okay.
And then of course the clam pizza was invented in New Haven. And you put the lemon on it.
The Zapardi's clam pizza is market price, but it's an amazing pizza. And then because what's really horrible coming and going to New Haven, of course, is 95.
Yes.
Like hell. Ugh. But when we were there, there's Fat Cat. The brew pubs are actually good.
Yes.
Fat Orange Cat Brewing makes some wonderful New England IPAs, and then Tribe. I think Tribe or Tribal in Milford.
Yeah, there's a couple down in Milford and Bridgeport area.
But I think it's called
Black Rock area.
I think it's called Tribal. It's not Black Rock, but you're close. You're getting close to Greenwich or something, but. When the traffic's really bad, just Google the local. I think it's called Tribal. It's like TRIBL or something. Really good beers, and then they get back when the traffic clears.
There you go. And then, and so you started exploring wine in Georgetown. Was there a bottle of wine? And it didn't have to be at Georgetown, but what was a bottle of wine where you're like, oh, I get this. I want to know more about this.
Yeah, well, that was a 1985. D'Angeville, Claude Chien. And and it was poured at a tasting, and I thought, oh my God, because I had tasted a lot of wines at that point. You know, and I had tasted there were Rieslings that I was really happy about, but this was transported me to another level.
I love that. I love that.
It was like, whoa, what is in my mouth? What is happening?
That is so awesome. Lisa Granik, oh my God. I could talk to you for 2 more hours. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Tell people where they can find you, where they can find the book. You guys can get this book, how they can be a part of what you're doing.
Wow. Anybody can email me, lisa@granikmw.com. I've got I have the book at my house because I had to buy a bunch of them, and then it was COVID. It's also available on Amazon, but the better copy is for me because it has the pictures. Because I had them shipped. And I had them shipped from England.
She'll sign it.
Yeah, right. I'll sign it. They're also for sale at Chama Mama. There are 2 locations in New York City. Great Georgian food. One's on 14th Street, close to 7th Avenue, and the other one is, I want to say it's on Amsterdam.
Is that where you posted that cool video of the guy singing?
No, that was in Georgia.
That was actually in Georgia.
Yeah.
Oh, one of her 9 posts, so you're not going to find her on social media.
And my favorite wine bar, Terroir. Paul Greco has
Love
them too.
Terroir.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, everybody, this has been just a thrilling conversation, and we'll have to have her come back on at some point because we'll go deeper dive.
Sounds fun. Drink some other wines.
Drink some more wines. Until next time, everybody, it's MJ. Cheers to the Mavericks, philosophers, deep thinkers, PhD, lawyer, all kinds of crazy teachers. She check off all the boxes, and all you wine drinkers out there, everybody, peace.